Is now called to order at 6:30 on July 17th, 2024. I ask the recording secretary, please call for the roll of attendance of members of the board.
Mr. Pilato?
Yes.
Mr. Ferraro?
Yes.
Mr. Shalko?
Yes.
Mr. Iafreda?
Speaking.
Mr. Stack?
Yes.
Also present from the building department, zoning inspector Chris Hall. All persons in the audience are required to sign in on the registration sheet as you did, I hope. Okay, if you have not, please do so. If you wish to speak at this hearing, you will be required to be sworn in as any court hearing. Minutes from our last meeting, is there any comments from the board?
I make a motion, we accept the meeting minutes from last meeting.
Any second?
Second.
Then accept it. All persons wishing to speak in this issue will please raise their right hand and affirm to this oath. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will be given before the board is to the best of your knowledge, an accurate and truthful presentation of the facts? If so, say I do.
I do.
Please state your name and relationship to the case for the tape recorder voice recognition. Would you start?
Tom Baldwin, Graham Hall Engineering, civil engineer.
Benjamin Ochner, counsel for the applicant.
Kevin Brown, Director of Senior Housing with National Church Residences, the applicant.
Stephen Ramage with Burry Partners, the architects.
Anybody else in the audience is going to speak? Would you please state your name?
Vinny J. Ventura, Macedonia City Council Representative.
Thank you. This hearing will be conducted in accordance with the provisions of the Ohio Sunshine Law. The notice of the hearing was duly published in a newspaper of general circulation in the city of Macedonia. The notice is available for review upon request at the building department. The rules of the board require affirmative vote of 3 members in order to pass regardless of number of members present at the hearing. The hearing is conducted in an informal manner to review the evidence and to respond to questions. However, there is an outline of steps that will be taken in order. An appellate does not have to be present to the board, okay, in the case to be publicized. Each case number will be appealed and request will be announced as it turns. First case is going to be case 701. And,
7-2.
pardon?
7-2.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. First case is 702, excuse me. Will the zoning inspector please state the position of the city?
The Board of Zoning and Building Code Appeals will hear a request for an area variance at Route 8 and Valley View Road for National Church Residences. The variance request is to section 1171-11C regarding off-street parking for senior citizen independent living. The applicant is requesting to have 55 off-street parking spaces instead of the required 81, a variance of 26 spaces.
Does the board member have any questions to the city? We'll let you present your position to the city, okay, to the board. So if you want to come up, if you have anything you want to see or show us, tell us, we're here. We have your blueprints and everything else that you have, if you'd like to use these or the ones that you have.
Well, I'll open up the festivities. My name is Ben Ochner with Friends Ochner and Greenberg, and represent National Church Residences. Typically, I represent developers and people who aren't quite as are not charitable organizations. So this evening, I feel like I'm on the side of the angels. National Church Residences provides housing for seniors, affordable housing for seniors, and In this case, it plans to build a 54-unit building, and it's going to be located at the intersection of Valley View and State Route 8. Property is zoned B2 in the business district, and we've already obtained a conditional use permit for this particular use. And now we are asking for two variances. The first one that we're talking about is a parking variance.
That's case 702 that you're talking about. That's where we're on right now. Governor?
Well, you know, my comments are based on, actually apply to both. If you don't mind, I can discuss.
Well, we're voting on one at a time, and 702 is the first, so I'd rather just work on 702, okay, which is the parking spaces, and then we'll go from there.
No problem. So, in support of the application, you can hear from three people. First, you're going to hear from Kevin Brown. Kevin is the National Church Residences Director, and he has basically spearheaded this development. He's going to provide an overview of the project. He's going to discuss the conditional use approval and the need for the variances. Among other things, Kevin's going to explain National Church Residences' extensive experience with this kind of house, these kinds of projects, and explain why the proposed parking allotment of just over one space per unit is more than necessary to satisfy the demand for parking spaces. Then you will hear from Tom Baldwin, who's going to provide, he's with Brig Home, he's introduced himself. He will be providing additional justification for the parking variance by describing various features of the property and surrounding areas, as well as easements on the property. The specific zoning regulations that are at issue here are the following. Code section 116708, which sets forth the requirements for a conditional use, conditionally permitted senior residential facility in the B2 district. Code section 1171 point,
What I want to see.
hold on 1 second. 116708. And then I'm assuming 1171.11B6 is the parking requirement. And then, of course, I'm sure you're all very familiar with 1135.13D1 that enumerates the factors for an area variance under your code. I want to say up front, I don't read your code as requiring specific findings on every one of the factors that are enumerated. The code says you just have to consider and weigh them. But I don't think that there's a requirement that you make a finding as to each. At the end of the day, those factors are based on a case by the Ohio Supreme Court, the Duncan case, which you're probably familiar with. And one of the principal aspects of the holding in that case is that the key consideration is whether the regulations at issue, as applied to the property, are reasonable. It doesn't matter if the applicant had knowledge of the zoning. In this case, we did, and you'll hear that nevertheless, we uncovered information about the property subsequent to proceeding that has an impact on our need for the variance. No single factor controls. With that, I would like to introduce Kevin Brown.
All right, thank you, Ben. Do you need me to restate my name for the record or anything?
No, you're fine.
Okay. So I'll probably stand up a bit, but,
Whatever you want to do. It's up to you.
Thank you, Chair. I thought it'd be helpful to give you a little more background on National Church Residences and events that I'm the director, but I'm a director. We're a company of about 2,600 people. But I'll just read you a little bit of information. Our company, National Church Residences, originates from a Christian commitment of service. We provide an array of healthcare services and a variety of housing options to over 60,000 seniors. We're a nonprofit organization driven by the mission and a vision to scale, to provide greater impact, advancing living for seniors. By 2030, that would be numbering 100,000 people. So we are very active in senior housing and renovation of senior housing and acquisition of senior housing. We own more than 350 communities across the U.S. We're in 25 states, but we are based in Columbus, Ohio. We are also the nation's largest nonprofit provider of affordable housing and the largest manager of service coordinators. So we provide housing, but we also provide a tremendous amount of service coordination. In addition, we also provide senior living options, including independent living, memory care, assisted living, at some specific facilities, mostly in the greater Columbus area. So we provide a tremendous amount of services. Last time we were here presenting before the Planning Commission, we had someone from our services side come up and also describe the on-site services that would be offered at this facility. In Ohio, we have a portfolio of 110 properties. In Northeast Ohio, we have 15 senior housing properties. And, that's Summit County over to the lake area over to the Pennsylvania border. So we are deeply experienced and deeply rooted in providing senior housing and in Ohio in particular. So the facility, as been mentioned, is a new senior housing facility. Just going to point to it here on the map. So it is a 54 unit. All 54 apartments are one-bedroom apartments. And I would say our experience is typically about 10% of those apartments would be occupied by two people. By and large, the vast majority of apartments, typically high 80s to 90%, are occupied by one person. And again, it would be located at the intersection of State Route 8 and Valley View Road. On this map, north is pointed to the left, and that's can be a little confusing. It's a little confusing to me sometimes. And this is an interesting site, right? I mean, it has very sort of awkward access from Valley View Road, providing shared driveway to the point where a property line picks up, and then we're going to have a driveway off of that shared driveway that brings us into the site. We've tried to keep the building as far back away from State Route 8 as possible. We are meeting all the setback requirements. As you can see, the red line in here delineates the setbacks. And I believe I think it's 108 feet total from the northern property line. And I'd have to check the numbers, but I think 122, 132 from the nearest residential structure. So the access does come off of Valley View Road, and it's not shown on here, but it is on the drawings that I think you have in front of you. That gives access by easements, and we do have easements, and it's shared between the dentist office and the bowling alley as well. Those easements and that access right away. So we have a driveway that comes into a turnaround, and off of that turnaround is the parking areas that provides the proposed 55 parking spaces for our tenant population. We've been working with, maybe stealing some of Tom's thunder here, but some of the fire chief to try to work in a plan that's acceptable for fire access to gain access as needed around the building. With a building of this size, 54 units, we have not seen a ring road being required, like a complete road around the building of this scale. We're trying to maintain as much of the trees. You know, it's not like a virgin woods out there. We're trying to maintain as much of that tree buffer as possible, but we do have to meet the requirements for stormwater retention, which is really eating up quite a bit of our property. And because of the easements that exist here that are delineated, we have a sanitary water easement that crosses, it actually runs north and south. We actually have a bit of stormwater retention that benefits our residential neighbors to the north on our property. So we're starting to see the site as being more and more carved up by areas that we can't build on, and we really can't put a stormwater detention structure upon either. So that starts to hem in those areas where we can place our parking and our stormwater detention, while at the same time trying to maintain as much green area and vegetation as possible. So the housing is for seniors 55 and up, living independently. The average age of our population in this type of housing is 74 years old, and about 68% of our population are female. So certainly our goal is to try to create a welcoming community, somewhere, a place where people are proud to live, and I'm happy to show you some of our recent developments. We've been around for 60 years, so we have developments of a lot of different vintages, let's say, but this is a typical, somewhat typical product that we're building, being a 3-story product, and I won't get into the height. Steve will talk about that in a little while. Trying to use a lot of brick material to be in harmony with the design standards of Macedonia in your housing, but trying to create a residential feel that welcomes visitors and guests and tries to create a home that people can be proud of. I'm not going to talk about the building itself right now, the amenities. I figured when we talk about the building, we can revisit that. The parking ratio of 1-to-1 is something that we've counted. We keep track of this. This isn't like the first time we've had to ask for a variance, of course, for parking, but we typically see a parking ratio that meets our requirements of about 0.7 spaces per apartment. And again, our portfolio is largely one-bedroom units. We do have I'm sure across our 22,000 senior housing, affordable senior housing apartments, a number of twos. But in this case, this is all one-bedroom apartments. So we feel confident that the 1-to-1 parking ratio is going to be sufficient to meet our demand at this location, given these are all one-bedroom apartments in our experience in other similar locations. So I guess with that, I'm going to pause and let Tom talk about some of the other aspects of the easement and some of the other issues that are kind of hemming us in a bit. And I'll be available to answer questions or to address other issues on this.
So, as Kevin mentioned, we've got a storm sewer easement and a sanitary easement that kind of goes right through here, which kind of is limiting our ability to put stormwater management on the site. We are limited, there's a break point in drainage where we're kind of limited to stormwater detention basin down here. It's not shown correctly, but it's where one of them is going. And to meet the City of Macedonia stormwater code, it requires another basin right here, which again we're limited to kind of come this way, as well as a final outlet for the stormwater which comes down here. So this area down here is also used for stormwater detention as well. One of the benefits for keeping kind of all of the parking area over here and not having the additional 26 spaces is an additional green space, which currently a lot of the general thinking is to limit the amount of impervious surface that is put onto a site in the beginning of a project, to help control stormwater, to help reduce that, to kind of improve water quality of the stormwater that runs off of the site itself. As Kevin mentioned, the 1-to-1 ratio based off of their requirements or what they see as their need is sufficient. So, I mean, that's kind of why we're limited into this, and kind of, as Kevin mentioned, we're can't really do anything up in here because of how restricted we are up on the top end. And that's really kind of one of the site restrictions.
Sure. Anybody else have anything to say?
Well, I guess the only thing I would add, even though we're not providing transportation for the seniors, we find our seniors are increasingly relying upon Uber and other rideshare opportunities to get around. And we serve seniors at this, we will be serving seniors at this facility of varying income levels. So some would opt not to have a car, especially if in their upper 70s or in their 80s. So they get around in other ways too. And as Tom mentioned, the environmental impact, trying to reduce the amount of impervious surface is certainly something that we're very conscious of too, trying to limit that to the greatest extent possible. So with that, that's the basis of why we're requesting the variance for parking.
Okay. I have to apologize because I skipped a step before you started talking, but that's fine. Right, it's no problem. Rachel, do we have any correspondence from anybody notified adjacent property owners?
No,
Or any unsolicited?
no.
No? And is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on behalf of this case? Would you please stand up and state your name? Just go right here to the microphone, and then we'll continue on.
My name is Vinny J. Ventura. I'm a 37-year resident of the city of Macedonia. I sit on city council. I'm in my 7th year of sitting on city council, which means I'm in my 2nd term. And my background is in law enforcement, 45 years of law enforcement experience. My concerns are, number one, how many handicap spaces are you going to allow for this situation, for this housing?
Do you want me to address that?
No, not yet. Just go ahead through everything you want. We'll address the handicaps and everything else.
Thank you, sir.
If you don't mind.
I'm concerned about how many handicap spots there's going to be and if they're going to be near the entrances and exits. What are you going to do for the holiday situation when these people have visitors coming in? How many spaces are there going to be available to them? When you came to the Planning Commission, you talked about you're going to have coordinators that are going to be able to come in and out of there and assist anybody that needs assistance. Okay? Are you going to have enough parking for them? You're going to have people that are going to depend on rideshare, as you say. I'm 72 years old. When I turn 77, you will not get my keys. You also have people coming in and out, like I said, to visit, especially during the holidays. And I don't think that I am against the variances being allowed for parking. I don't think it's a wise decision. I think it's going to make things too tight. These people are older. They're going to need more room to get out of their own vehicles with the doors open wider, depending what kind of vehicle they're driving. So you can't narrow the spaces down anymore. I mean, you see in different shopping centers where that becomes an issue. So I speak against allowing this variance in the parking. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anything else for the board that you want to explain to us, and then we'll get into our questions to you?
We can address the ADA space location. We'll be meeting the requirements of ADA, the American Disabilities Act, with the number of spaces correlating to our number of parking spaces. Currently, there are 3 handicap out front and then 2 handicap on the one side. The main entrance is located right here. In this end. So they are very close to the entrance. And as we do our grading and all the grading slopes and whatnot of the parking area and walk, will meet the ADA requirements. National Church or Residence is very conscious of walks and making sure that those are all safe to be used in all terms of all weather and whatnot. So as for the space requirements for the holiday and coordinators, I'll let Kevin speak a little bit to that.
Before you go that further, I have a question. You said the average age is 74 years old of the occupants?
Yeah.
And we only have 5 handicap spots in the whole parking area for 74-year-old and older?
That's pretty typical from what we provide. I mean, that's actually exceeding code requirement. Yeah, I mean, typically, because I think we're doing, 10% of the units is fully accessible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's matching up with the amount of accessible units that are being provided, which again are above and beyond code requirements.
Yeah, I was going to inquire on that also. So that's typically, the wording is ADA minimum requirements. What is the ADA minimum requirements for this dwelling?
5%.
It's 5%. So 5% would be 5.4 handicap spots. There's 54 spots, or no, so there's 49 regular and then 5 handicap. Do we meet the minimum requirements? Are we just meeting it, or you said we're well beyond it? Because I agree, it seems like we're right there.
Yeah, that would be 3, right, if it's 5% of 54.
3 is what you need to.
That would be the minimum requirement for the code, would be 3 handicaps, because 5% of the 54, the 55 that we're providing. And of the units, you know, the handicap unit requirement would be.
So it's like, these would be presumably the tenants' handicap spots, and this would be like the staff over here, is that the?
No, there's no assigned spaces.
Okay.
And I think.
You
Tom
said there was
some of the
3 up
handicap-
front and 2 on the side.
Yeah, looks
Yeah,
like
right.
3 and then
Two.
2. Is that 2 part of this 5 number here?
Yes, that would be.
How many units did you say were fully accessible?
6, I believe. That's what I read.
That was
That are fully accessible?
Yes.
Yes.
So if those are
6
fully
fully
occupied,
accessible units and only
5
5
spaces
spaces.
for those 6 units.
Yeah.
So it's less than
what you have accessible.
what you're advertising for accessibility.
I mean, I guess if you're correlating the parking spaces to the units, yes. Yeah. We can certainly look at that.
And you said that just because they're 1-bedroom apartments, you're considering that it's only be a 1-person apartment is what you're saying?
So I would say across our portfolio, my understanding is that about 10% of our units have double occupancy. That 90% of the apartments are occupied by 1 person.
Yeah, so it comes out to about 59.4 residents in the facility.
Right, if you only have 55 spaces to park and they don't have vehicles, okay? Besides, the other question the gentleman asked, that Vinny asked, was about visitors. Okay, if you have somebody coming, your kids are coming to visit you, relatives, or whatever the case may be, where are they gonna park? There's no parking for them, is there?
Well, from what I can tell you from our experience in other very similar facilities, that's not been an issue. That typically we have parking ratios that are lower than this, and we don't have problems. That typically we're having less than 0.7 spaces per unit actually being utilized across our portfolio. In other jurisdictions, that's typically what we're building out, is 0.7 spaces per apartment.
Our code is 1.5 spaces per unit,
Yeah.
our code.
Not even quite half, half.
Correct.
So the way I'm looking at this, guys, is, we have a potential of 54 units, and we say 10% have double occupancy, so we're at 59.4 residents. Let's assume none of them are handicapped, okay? And those 5 spaces get removed from your, what was the total, 55?
55.
So now you have 50 spots with 59.4 residences.
But you have 6 units that are handicapped accessible units.
Those could be given
Well,
to anybody.
unless
So if you
you
play
can't.
this scenario, you don't have enough spots. If you play the scenario where all your handicapped units are full, you don't have enough spots. Okay? And I understand your point about Ubers and stuff like that, but these are 55 and older. I don't see many people using Ubers.
Well, you have Ubers, you have taxis, but the thing is, we haven't even got into the area yet for our safety forces, okay?
Safety Forces is one thing. This is a company who prides themselves on
Right.
service coordination and on-site services. Where is there a director, is there nursing, is there cleaning, is there facilities, is there kitchen staff? Are there guests, are there caretakers, is there families, is there a physician, is there a friend, is there a maintenance worker? Is there a postman, a FedEx guy, and a UPS guy? All crowding this space, which already doesn't have enough parking. Then we can start talking about city services and whether the building is too big for the property.
Do you want me to address any of those questions?
Please.
I don't have, there are more of statements on my end, that's just what I'm gathering as you guys are presenting your case.
But it's a good question, I would like you to answer it, yes.
So this is independent living, just first and foremost, right? So this is not like a congregate care setting. So seniors living independently, so there's no meal service, there's no housekeeping. These are apartments where we will have an on-site property manager, on-site maintenance person, and we will have a service coordinator part-time.
Okay. And some of these folks probably aren't cleaning their own spaces, maybe they're hiring cleaning services, deliveries. I'm looking at this as a very crowded place.
Could be, but again, these are housing units that are affordable to those individuals and households earning up to 60% of the area median income.
So, and then another question, this is a question, point 7 is what you have at similar locations. Are those similar locations, are they 3-story dwellings also? Are they single-story dwellings, or, you know, what are you considering similar? Because
Sure.
I look at all these variables at 3-story, 4-story, you know, these are more mobile people who probably will be more apt to having cars, and stuff like that, and more visitors. You know,
So
single-story
Do you have
dwelling
pictures of some
would
of your
not
other
be similar.
facilities?
No, I didn't bring those with me. We provided those
And I
previously.
think there's elevators in here also.
Yeah. So our typical development is 65, 70 apartments, 3- and 4-story buildings. That's probably our sweet spot. We are building some new construction buildings that are 4 stories that are 80 to 90 apartments, all elevated, having the requisite number of handicap accessible apartments and parking spaces. Yeah, we're building those all over. We're under construction in about 7 states right now. That's our typical product that we're building currently. As I mentioned, we have a vintage of a lot of different products going back to the early 60s. So those are a very different style building. The parking ratios are probably much lower than most of those. They were funded during different times and with different funding sources.
So I have one more statement, and it kind of ties into the height of the building also, which, I know we haven't gotten there,
Right.
but, you know, the parking spaces are directly tied into the height of the building and the size of the building, and maybe 54 is a great number for a businessman, but maybe not for this property. Maybe we should be reducing that number 54 down to 50, maybe reducing the span of the roof, which would then lower it, creating more green space for you to create adequate parking to get up to our city requirements here.
You have plenty of room, adequate green space for more parking. Okay, so I mean, there should be no problem you put the parking in, okay, but as you can see, I mean, I understand exactly where you're coming from. I feel that there's not enough parking, okay? I don't
Maximize tenant.
I don't see a difficulty here at all.
Yeah, I was gonna say 2 things. Number one, I appreciate all of the information that you provided. There was a lot of really good background info, so, thank you for that. The other thing I wanna say is, to your point, from a practical difficulty perspective, I'm not really seeing what the specific difficulty is.
Yeah.
Right, so like, the parking that's on the plan, is more of a want than a need, right, is based on the property size? It seems like, was it the city planner I read said?
Yeah, Brian French.
Yeah, Brian said, that there's space on the property for it, so can you describe what the difficulty is in not putting that parking there?
It's really a quality of life issue. I mean, we're trying to provide as much green space outside as we possibly can for our residents, try to make a more enjoyable environment. Trying to keep the parking as close to the building as possible for their use. So it's really, to the extent that we can preserve green space and not have to maintain that parking in the future, it benefits our tenant population.
Well, you said you've been to the planning commission already, and that's their job to make sure there's enough green space. So if they told you that this is what you need, okay, and they instructed you on what you need to put in, that's enough green space. That's not in our realm, actually, okay? But the planning commission is the one going, telling you what to go for, of what green space you're gonna need. Go ahead, Robert Joseph.
I was just, I guess I'm a little bit confused. I thought you were saying we're not putting in parking because we're choosing to have more green space, not that the city, does the city have any type of code of how much green space is required there? Am I misunderstanding?
No, the planning commission will address that, okay? What we're addressing
Okay,
is
there's not a code of we need to maintain a certain amount of green space, we're
No, but
just
there's
choosing to do that for
shrubbery
quality.
and everything else is
For
is all
quality
included.
of,
Correct, not for quality of life, that's correct.
I have a question for the city. Do we have any requirements for green space?
No.
Thank you.
If I-
Yes.
Mr. Franz's memorandum was very informative, and one of the things that he pointed out, which I think speaks somewhat compellingly to the need for the variance, or the appropriateness of the variance, is that if we put in all of the parking spaces, there is technically room on the property for us to meet your parking requirement. We don't need it all, based on our experiences. We understand some of your questions, and may not have been answered to your satisfaction, but we can only speak from our experience. But if we put in all of the parking, some of that parking is gonna be a football field away from the entrance.
So it would end up being only this such year.
And as Mr. Franz pointed out, during heavy weather and, cold weather, where people who use those parking spaces would have quite a haul.
Well, if,
But we would
If
meet
that's the
code
case-
requirements.
That was
We
my
would meet
question
code
coming
requirements
up.
though.
so,
Is the 325 feet away in northeast Ohio in this kind of weather. Now we are putting a real burden because with this celebration at the holiday time, we're not talking of children and teenagers, we're also talking of senior citizens.
but if what you say is true about not needing those spaces, then those people wouldn't park there anyway, right? So you don't have an issue, and you can comply with code.
This is true on the one hand. On the other hand, we attach some significance to the reduction in impervious surfaces that the project will have by not putting in unnecessary parking. So the two factors, we don't need it, and it's not all that hospitable to require people who decide, for whatever reason, to park so far away, to weather the elements. We think between those two issues and the others, that there is a practical difficulty. I mean, look, the fact that we can put on a full complement of parking does not mean there's no practical difficulty. It's, a long time ago, I was involved in a case in the Ohio Supreme Court, Goldberg Companies versus Richmond Heights. And in it, the Ohio Supreme Court said a requirement that the property owner put in twice as many parking spaces as the evidence established was unreasonable, especially given the fact that compliance with the zoning regulations would have necessitated the removal of a stand of mature shade trees valued at somewhere around $150,000. I think this is a similar situation. We don't have a stand of mature shade trees, but we have green space, and we are avoiding putting a hard surface where, in place of green space. And what, impervious surfaces are the work of the devil as far as the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District is concerned.
But it is needed though.
If that's,
Okay.
I guess if that's the case, then you shouldn't have this property here. at all,
You
right?
need less impervious surface if you have less residents too. We could reduce the 54 down to something that can meet code requirements too. And we could still withhold, you know, you wanting to reduce impervious surfaces with that. So we could still meet all of this, instead of adjusting the 1.5 parking spaces, let's adjust the 54 independent units.
The 1.5 is
To
not,
50.
is not.
And then we get down to parking that's getting a little bit more manageable, you know, by reducing 54 to 50 instead of the parking from 85 to,
But we're on
you know, so there's, you know, there's other ways to skin this cat too, you know,
It's
we can go the other way.
units. It's the 1.5 units, spaces per unit that we are contesting here.
We understand that, and that's the city of Macedonia's code, okay?
Specifically for senior living, which I could see if it was for, you know, general businesses or restaurants or whatever, you're like, well, this doesn't really meet that because it's not that kind of business. This is specifically designed in the code for this type of property, right? And I would,
Go ahead.
sorry,
No, I'm interrupting, go.
no, go ahead.
My other question is the pictures show the front of the building here, and there's entrances at the front of the building, correct? Is there any entrances at the back of the building?
Well, we have a patio at the back of the building, and we have the required amount of egress exits from the end of the building.
But my point is I don't see any parking spaces on the back of the building.
That's right, because we're trying to keep that as clear as green space as possible.
Well, if the building was moved over, you'd have plenty of green
Just
space.
put parking there too, just maintaining green space, it's not a requirement, this is what they want to do this.
I
They're
understand.
choosing to do that. And it's-
That's what they're asking to do,
Yeah.
correct? Okay, but my point is if we're gonna need the parking spaces, there's none in the back of the building. All you have is in the front and on the one side, from what I see. Am I correct or incorrect?
Well, parking on the backside of the building over here, you'd run into putting pavement and whatnot over a city easement, or an easement that has sanitary and storm sewer and other utilities in it.
That happens, that still happens though, right? I mean, we
Yes,
do
but
that.
you were-
And setbacks aren't necessarily impacted by parking also, so, you know, easeways and setbacks, you know, more, you know, not necessarily impacted.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Can you guarantee that there will not be over a certain number of cars, or people with cars that are living in this space?
What kind of guarantee would you be looking for?
Like, can you guarantee that, like, once you hit a certain point, you say, you know what, you can't, no one else can bring a car, right?
So, I mean, if you said no, we couldn't have more than one car per space or something, I mean, one car per apartment or
That's
something?
not gonna work.
Right, no, I'm just
I can
asking
make that
more for,
guarantee, sure, I mean, if you're asking me to make a guarantee that we won't have more parking, more cars than there are apartments on the building, yeah.
I just, the parking, the spaces are, the spaces, the limited spaces that you're asking for, and the senior citizens, okay, and I know you talked the distance, but there's gotta be a way to put parking in here, the amount that you need, okay, and closeness for the senior citizens. Nobody wants to walk a football field, okay? You know, and the big thing is if you're putting a structure up this big, you gotta be able to put parking around it, especially if you've done this before for all of these senior citizens, okay? In these other units that you have, you can't tell me that they're parking 300 feet away. And if they are, I really feel bad for you, or the people that are living in that unit, because I sure the hell wouldn't want to live there.
Well, real quick, do you know the width of these parking spaces?
That was a good question.
You wanna, I mean, it'd be the city, whatever the city code is
The
what we would.
Minimum.
Because,
The minimum.
because, like where I work, we've got 8-foot spaces. And seniors are not gonna have it. I just thought you could probably reconfigure it, minimize all the spaces and you might even meet it. But I think what you're trying to do is take care of the clients by making the spaces a reasonable, what you had said before. You've got elderly, actually, I'm in this situation with my mom at this point, and it isn't exactly as you would think one-on-one, but again, I was just of the thought that if they were normal spaces or the minimum that the city allows, if you kind of moved them around a little bit, you could probably sneak the other ones in there at what you've got. Which isn't good, because you wanna have something that seniors need more space.
Anything else?
I think what we're maybe missing here is there is space on the property, but they'd rather not, just to maintain the green space. I think they have plenty of room in spaces where we can put in parking spots.
Correct.
Which I already said, we can put it here. We don't need to come up with solutions for them to shrink or do this or do that. There's space. They're choosing to save green space and asking us for permission to go against, from 1.5 to 0.7 or 1, and go against, and I just don't see it.
No. Go ahead.
Our research is sincere. I don't think you doubt that. Is there a way to land bank spaces by a variance, so that if we're right, we don't have this extra impervious surfaces and we get to preserve the green space? If we're wrong, if it turns out that we are underparked, or overparked, whatever, then the land bank would have to be developed.
Well, I guess we're not here to play let's make a deal. Okay, you know what I'm saying? We're here to look at the facts, and then we're gonna vote on the facts. Okay, so I personally, and I could talk to our law director if I had to, and I don't think that would be the right way to go, okay? We're not going to say this, and this, and then if this works out, we could do this, all right? So
I think the right approach would be to vote on the case that's presented today.
That's correct.
And
Yes.
start with that,
That's what we have to do.
period.
Do
And if
you have
another
any?
case is presented,
Right.
be willing to entertain it as it goes through the appropriate channels.
If you have anything else,
I don't have
Anybody?
anything else to offer at this point on this particular item.
board members, anything? The chair is open for any motion.
I make the motion to deny.
I second it.
Case
702, that's correct. For the variance. Rachel, roll call.
Mr. Colado,
Yes.
Mr. Ferraro,
Yes.
Mr. Shelko,
No.
Mr. Iafreda,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes, we're voting to deny. Yes, to
That's
deny.
correct.
Yes, to-
Yes.
Case 702 has been denied, and we'll be going on to case 703.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if I may reintroduce the matter, this is a variance from the 35-foot maximum building height. And I should introduce, though you've already heard from him, because I neglected to introduce him earlier, and I apologize. Steve Ramage of Berardi Partners.
Is this for the height?
This is for the height.
Okay, give me 1 second, and we'll get into it, and then you could finish what you're saying.
Okay.
All right, we're going to do case 703. And I would like to see what the city's position. Chris?
The Board of Zoning and Building Code Appeals will hear a request for an area variance at Route 8 and Valley View Road for National Church residences. The variance request is to section 1167.03G regarding the height of a building in a B2 community shopping district. The applicant is requesting a variance of 1.5 feet to increase the allowable height from 35 to 36.5 feet.
Rachel, has there been any correspondence from any notified adjacent property owners
no,
on any unsolicited correspondence regarding this case?
no.
Okay, thank you.
Apologize for jumping.
You're fine, you're doing good.
So, Mr. Ramage is going to discuss the need for the height variance. And
Yeah, thank you for having us here. As she said, my name is Steve Ramage with Brody Partners, the architect firm for the project. I would start by saying that the zoning code maximum height is 35 feet for a two-story senior residential facility. We are looking for a height increase. I would first start by saying all other components of the building comply with the current zoning requirements. When we get up here to talk through the building real quick. As you can see here, we have an elevation of the building, and I'll start talking about the massing first. As you can see, we have undulation of the exterior facade, giving it a character of a residential style. Going along with that, as noted before, we do have a lot of masonry to go along with the character of Macedonia, in addition to additional colors and textures of siding material. We do have additional architectural details in the building to give it that additional residential character, including gable vents and porch areas at the entry and the exterior rear patio. And lastly, the roof is currently a asphalt shingle roof with a 5 to 12 pitch slope, which would be typical for single-family residential housing. In order to match up with the character, for example, the adjacent Spring Hill development, that is what we're basing this off of. I would also note that
The roofs we're looking at there, that's a 512, it looks more like a 1012 or a 1212.
I'm specifically talking about the main gable.
Okay, but the one that we're pointing to there, okay,
Yes.
not that one.
Correct.
Oh,
Could you do us a
Because
favor?
those are all
Just
gonna
put
be.
that board right here in this, in the first one.
Yes.
It'd be a lot easier for you and us, if you don't mind. Thank
We're
you.
done with the site, here we go.
That's
Um,
it right there.
So we are looking at this exhibit that we had presented, kind of showing the view from the adjacent Spring Hill development and the sight lines here. There is a lot of existing landscape planting evergreen trees, both on their property and proposed plantings on our side. So the setback of the building is 108 feet from the property line, and then was additional setback of 130-something to the adjacent residential, single-family housing in the back. So as you can see,
You're speaking Spring Hill, correct?
yes,
Okay.
and there is an elevation drop as well, which increases the lower visual of our building. So as you can see, the sight line from the backyard of the house, you can barely see the multifamily proposed building. I think we could go with, a flat roof or something else, but, or lower slope, but even then, from a ground perspective, you're really starting to lose that slope on the roof, and again, I think that would be a detriment to the character and ultimately end up in a more commercial look, which is not what we would like to provide.
I have a handful of questions.
I was gonna ask if the board has any questions. Go ahead.
The first drawing in relationship to the second drawing, is this pitch shown in this drawing the same pitch in that? On your
Yes.
gables? That,
On the gables, yes.
and this is what's the pitch on that gable? Are she saying all the roofs are 512?
No, I'm saying that the main roof.
The main roof is
main
512,
red roof,
and the gables that we're looking at here are what?
I do not know.
It look like a 1012 or 1212.
Typically, we don't go that steep, just
Steep,
because
good.
it's more difficult to construct.
It's
and
more
safety issues.
it's more expensive to do a 12.
And I believe it
And
would
on
be
the inside, what is it
Okay.
inside there?
So you currently have if you just give me a moment here. If you currently have a 512 on the main roof and 812 on the complementary gable roofs, can't you just reduce that to a 412 on the main and then a 712 on the complementary, or change the span of the building, or the wall height of this wall height right here? If you lowered that wall height, you could then make all your ridges line up with, if you look at that photo there, your main ridge. So you have multiple ways that you could do this. I know this because of my background. I do